and just welcome everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people, a lot of familiar names in the chat. But for those of you who don't know me, I am Anna Everett. I'm an instructional designer in the Office of Online Learning here at Nashville State. Um, what I'm here with you today to talk about is just continuing on what some of the sessions this morning have already started the conversation on, is talking about student engagement and interaction, but specifically for online courses. So today I'm just going to talk about how you can build student community, build better means of communication into your online courses, so that students feel more engaged and like they have more of an interactive component when they're in our online asynchronous courses. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because I think, for those of you who've taught online, I think a lot of you know that this can be a real challenge. It speaks to, I think, one of the central challenges we have as online instructors. How do we connect and engage with students when we never see them face to face? We might never see them face to face. So today I just want to talk about why it's important to build meaningful interaction opportunities into an online course. And then I just want to share with you a couple of tips and tricks, some suggestions for maybe making your online course a place where students feel more connected to their instructor, to other students, where they feel supported, and where they feel like they can participate as part of a community of learners. I want to share that with you, but I also want to talk with you and get your feedback and hear about your experiences. So before we get too deep into it, I first just wanted to ask you all, because you all are in the classroom and you all are teaching your courses. So you're on the ground and you know exactly what these challenges look like as they play out in your courses. But so I just wanted to ask you all, what challenges have you had connecting or engaging with your online students? Do you find that to be challenging? Do you find it to be difficult? And why do you think that might be? Yep, you're showing classroom presence. Yeah, just feel free to chime in or drop it in the chat. Oh, Robert has his hand up. Did you have
I,
something?
I did. The biggest challenge that I see with online classes is the pre-expectations that students come in with, pre-assumptions that they
Mm-hmm.
come in with, because and they're all different. It's not like I can say this is what they come in assuming that this course is going to be about or like.
Mm-hmm.
They come in with all variations, and we have students that may not even log in for the first 2 or 3 weeks.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
They assume that whole work at your own pace thing, or
Mhm.
they come in and they assume that an online class means Zoom. Thank you, COVID. Uh, I mean, so it's overcoming those assumptions.
Yeah. I mean, students do have a lot of assumptions that are maybe incorrect about what an online course is that they're coming in with. We get questions all the time about, can I take online courses as self-paced courses? And that is generally not the case at Nashville State. So it's really important, for you as an instructor to maybe explain to students exactly what an online course means. What does that mean for their participation? What is expected of them? What do you expect of them? And what can they expect from you as the instructor? We had a couple of comments in the chat I want to catch up with. Janessa, I find it hard for students to understand the magnitude of personal responsibility required for learning in an online asynchronous course. That's absolutely true. That's another assumption I think some students come in with, is that they assume an online course might be easier than an in-person course. And that might not be the case. I mean, depending on how the student learns and what kind of learning environment the student feels comfortable with, they might find an online course to actually be more difficult, especially if they struggle with maintaining a consistent schedule and being accountable um, for meeting their own deadlines, which is probably going to be the case for most online courses. Students are working, but for the most part, independently without the direct supervision of an instructor hovering over them. So they have to be much more accountable and personally responsible for maintaining their own schedule. Uh, Laura, I feel challenged keeping students engaged. yeah, especially students who do not submit work or start to fall behind. Um, yeah, so that's another opportunity for when we have students who fall behind in online courses. Another opportunity for instructors to engage with those students and try to reach out. Some students want to connect more with others. Yeah, some students, perfectly content to just work on their own and learn independently. I know I can be that kind of person at times, but students, I think some students, often crave the connection that they would have in an in-person course that is often lacking in an online course because you don't have in-person meetings, you don't have Zoom meetings, and you might never see your instructor face to face or on Zoom. Some students are simply MIA. Who here has had a student ghost them? I know I have. Students who maybe show up for the first few weeks, and despite multiple attempts to reach out to them, they just never respond, and you might never hear from them again. So there's a greater risk of that with online courses without kind of the in-person accountability and that social component we have in in-person courses. It can be harder to keep students engaged throughout the semester. So yeah, you have some students who disconnect entirely and maybe just exit the course. Students understanding deadlines and assignments, again, speaks to the importance of, making sure that your expectations are clear up front. In an in-person course, you might go over that like on the first day and repeatedly verbally throughout the semester, but in an online course, those expectations have to be made explicitly clear in text in a way that that is accessible to students. And then we have a couple of people sharing some good strategies that they've used. So sending an email to students in a CC email the week prior to courses, just giving them some information about logging in and getting started. That's a good move if you already have a class list available to you and you know who's in your course. Of course, keeping in mind that D2L courses are not available to students until the very first day of the class. Yeah, we have a couple. We're going to get into this more later on, but we have a couple of great suggestions of how to get around some of the barriers that we mentioned about a lack of clarity on expectations, difficulty engaging with students who have maybe fallen off or fallen behind. And a great point from Dale here. I'm gonna read aloud, and then we're gonna go ahead and continue. But Dale points out that some, just as in a classroom, some students are invisible. I think that's especially true maybe with our online students. They don't want to be seen. Sometimes they're unprepared and they don't want anyone to notice that. So just trying to emphasize that mistakes are a part of the learning process. I think that's a really valuable comment. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to catch up with everyone, but I encourage you to continue the conversation in the chat. Everyone, it sounds like everyone has some pretty good a pretty good sense of what our challenges are with connecting with our online students, and also some really good suggestions for how to get around that. And that's exactly what we're going to move into. So a few of you have brought up a couple of these points already, but just to kind of summarize what we've talked about, what are some of the challenges with connecting and engaging with our online students? I think the major difference between our in-person courses and our asynchronous online courses is that in an in-person course, there's much more opportunity for spontaneous interaction. So if in online, they don't have any set meetings with their instructor or their classmates, and they might not ever again, see them in person. Students are working on their own schedule. They log into the course at different times, which is great because students have very busy schedule, busy work lives. And so that can be a really excellent way to reach students who might otherwise not be able to participate in an in-person course. But you're also missing out on that element of spontaneity. If you think about your in-person courses, students will make friends with each other just by virtue of sitting next to each other in class. They might bump into you in the hall. In the classroom, they get the opportunity to ask questions or participate in discussions in real time. But because everyone is on a different schedule in online, there's no possibility for kind of those real-time conversations. So online students, I think, can feel that they maybe don't have the same opportunities to interact with their instructor or form a personal bond or connection with their instructor or with other students in the class, because they're separated by both space and time. And any extra interaction that they're having is happening through a really highly structured, highly mediated technological environment. So some of the commenters in the chat have alluded to this, but as a consequence of that, I think online students can be much more likely to feel isolated or possibly disconnected from their instructor or their peers, maybe even college altogether. So in online courses, we have an opportunity there, a challenge and an opportunity, and that the instructor has to really make an effort to consciously create those opportunities for connection and for community. It just often won't happen on its own. So, so why does it matter? I mean, I think we all kind of have an intuitive sense of why it matters. We don't want students to be disconnected. We don't want them to be disengaged, obviously. But there are also a couple of other pretty strong reasons why you really want to have a strong interactive component in your online course and really make an effort to try to humanize yourself, humanize the course, and get students connected with each other and with you. In the first place, we have a compliance mandate that we have to meet with online courses. I'm sure most of you are probably aware of this, but it still bears repeating. This comes from the Department of Education. So in order for online courses to qualify for federal financial aid, the Department of Education requires that our online courses have regular and substantive interaction. So what does that mean? It means the students, they have to have at least some kind of opportunity for direct interaction with their instructor, and the instructor must interact with learners on a predictable and scheduled basis. So in other words, we can't just have online courses where your students come in, watch videos, read some readings, and take an auto-graded quiz. There has to be some element of discussion, some element of interaction, or at least the opportunity for that to take place. The key word is opportunity, Dale, yes. But there are plenty of ways that you can incentivize and encourage and promote student participation in online courses. So continuing on, what does regular and substantive interaction look like? So it looks like what we see here on the right-hand side of this graphic. So it can come in the form of feedback on assignments, weekly announcements that are explaining content or explaining to students what they can expect to come next, video lectures that are recorded by the instructor, discussions. That's mainly how most people are going to meet that requirement. In most online courses, discussions on discussion boards inside of D2L are usually the go-to that a lot of people first think of. But here I'm just introducing you to, there are many other ways that you can build in an interactive component into your course. Office hours. So even though our online courses that are labeled as online in the schedule are purely asynchronous, so there can't be any required Zoom meetings, you can still have optional Zoom meetings. You can still ask that students maybe try to schedule a time to meet with you in your office hours. And then finally, of course, you can also have individual conversations via email or Zoom. Basically, any of those things meet that standard of regular and substantive interaction. What we don't want is what we see on the left-hand side, or at least just not exclusively what we see on the left-hand side. We don't want just courses where students, log in, they read from the textbook, and then they take an auto-graded quiz, rinse and repeat. We want them to have some opportunity to interact with the instructor or other students, because that's often where learning happens. Even in online courses, the instructor is absolutely central to guiding students' learning, and we want them to be able to connect with their instructor. So that's enough with the compliance mandate stuff. And I just want to emphasize that the other reason why we should care about this is not just that we have to meet this standard, we have to meet these requirements, because there are rules that come down from on high that say we have to do this. Those rules are actually pretty well supported in the theory and research on teaching and learning in online environments, particularly thinking about the community of inquiry framework. There's a lot of teaching and learning research centered on this framework. Essentially, it proposes that deep and meaningful educational experiences, especially with the online environment in mind, have to emerge out of three vital interactions. And to simplify just a little bit, those three interactions include interactions between the student and the content. Obviously, we often think that's the most important thing, is students engaging with the content and meeting our learning objectives. But the community of inquiry framework proposes that equally important to that is interactions between the student and the instructor, and interactions between classmates as equally important to promoting meaningful educational experiences. And again, that is pretty well borne out in the existing research, which suggests that well-supported social and teaching presence, a sense of connection with other students and with the instructor in online courses, is pretty strongly correlated with at least students' perceived level of learning. That is, how much students, when they self-assess themselves, how much they say that they have learned, higher student satisfaction, and improved course outcomes. So this is where we're going to move into the how. So we have kind of a sense of the why, but how do we do that? How do we get past those barriers to connection that we addressed earlier? And what can we do to encourage students to interact and engage with us and our peers in online courses? So this is where we move into the more practical element. And I encourage everyone to read through the chat, because I am just glimpsing at it, but I'm seeing a lot of great suggestions already being shared in the chat. So I encourage you to join that conversation. So when we think about what we can do, obviously the easiest thing that we can control is how we ourselves engage with students, or at least how we create opportunities for engagement and communication with us, because it's the instructor that's going to be the central point of communication. It's the instructor that's going to set the tone for a welcoming learning environment in an online course. So a couple of practical things that you can do from day one, as promised in the title of this workshop, is very simply, all of these are very simple, very easy to implement. Nothing has, you don't have to make radical changes necessarily to the structure of your course. But one very easy thing you can do is just post a welcoming introduction. I think in our introductions, sometimes we have the tendency to maybe just skip straight ahead to, here's the requirements, here's the syllabus, here's the textbook, go get started. But the welcome introduction message is also an opportunity to set the tone and set the climate for the course. This is a place where you can give students kind of a sense of who you are, why you care about the topic that you're teaching, and to let students know that you're committed to their success, that you care about them, that you are a point of contact and someone that they can reach out to as needed. Because you have that barrier between you. Students aren't going to meet you in person. They're not going to have the opportunity to ask questions face to face. So you need to help them feel comfortable reaching out, however they need to do that. So I would suggest, using maximizing the welcome message is a place where you can set a positive tone, a place where you can give students a sense of your own enthusiasm for the course. Enthusiasm is infectious. If students get a sense of why you care, they have a better sense of why they should in turn care. Even better, if you're up for it, I would suggest trying to just record a short introductory video. Gail, oh great, Gail did a welcome video and students enjoyed that. I think that that's really important, because it gives you an opportunity to let students see your face, to know who you are, and to know that you're not a robot. More important than ever in an age of ever improving artificial intelligence. So a video, I know a lot of us don't necessarily like to see ourselves on video, don't like to show our faces. But this is just another opportunity for you to give students a sense of who you are as a person. And I promise it's very, very easy to record a video in D2L. If you don't need to download anything, you don't need to do anything special. From any page inside of D2L, be that an announcement page, be that a content page in your content area, if you just click the insert stuff button, you can very easily add a video note. It will turn on your webcam and allow you to record a video right then and there, post it, done. Very easy. And this doesn't have to be super long. It doesn't have to be super thought out. In fact, it's probably better if it can be a little bit casual, a little bit, giving students a little bit of a sense of who you are, letting you show kind of your authentic personality. A video can be a really great way to do that, especially if you're a stronger speaker than you are a writer. And yeah, Amy created a nerdy YouTube video where she showed a bit of herself in her home life, and I think students like that, you know, because they can again, it just humanizes you to them and makes them maybe feel a little less intimidated reaching out to the professor behind the screen. A Meet Your Instructor page. I think a lot of people have this already. Just a brief biographical summary of who you are. But a couple of things to keep in mind. I would suggest, you know, not writing this as if it's just a resume. Of course, you want students to know that you are an expert in your field and what your qualifications are. But this is also a great place to explain to students or emphasize to students again, why are you passionate about the subject that you teach? Again, enthusiasm is infectious. If students see that you care, they are more likely to care themselves. And I just grabbed a really great excerpt from one of our online developers who I think did a really good job of at least planting the seed there of forming connections with students. So he writes that he's the proud dad of 2 college students. So believe me when I say I understand a bit about your journey and I'm deeply invested in your success. And then he goes on to give a sense of, you know, what his hobbies are, what he does outside of work. And again, why he's passionate about his subject, which in this case happened to be creative writing. So he's really looking forward to meeting you and exploring the world of creative writing together. So good sense. Really does a good job setting a positive, welcoming, warm tone. Another suggestion when you're thinking about how can you promote better student-instructor engagement is to maximize your discussions. I think way too often I've seen online instructors have designed discussions that they just kind of set and then forget. And that's not really the purpose of discussions. The purpose of discussions, I think we forget because again, it's in a text-based form. It's a little bit different, a little bit less organic and fluid as opposed to a verbal discussion. But it's intended to be a conversation. So I would suggest don't set it and leave it. Participate in your discussions. Chime in. Respond to students' posts. If students post something that's maybe a bit unclear or that they could expand upon, don't just wait until you're writing your feedback and grading the assignment to point that out. Reply to their post and model good academic discussion that moves the conversation forward. Ask questions, clarify, insert your own expertise in the field when and where appropriate. And clarify points of confusion. Another thing, one way you can really make sure that you're keeping on top of discussions and following and making sure that you're an active participant in the conversation is to subscribe. Students can do this too, but you can subscribe to your discussions, very easy. It's a one-click button. It's a little star button that you'll see underneath the title of the discussion, and that will send you either notifications in D2L or email, your choice, just letting you know when someone has posted a new thread to the discussion so that you can go back and make sure that you have the opportunity to respond if you want to. It's also a great way to just kind of keep tabs on making sure that discussion is remaining civil and progressing in a productive way. Other things you can do with discussions, again, you don't just set it and forget it. If you have a conversation in a class or a discussion in class, you're probably not going to just have that discussion and then forget about it and never talk about it again. It's going to come up again. So make references back to previous discussions in your announcements, or when you're explaining what you've gone over in a previous module, reviewing or summarizing. Maybe you could highlight really good points that a particular student has made. This is something I in the past have tried to make a practice of, is whenever I would post an announcement concluding or closing out a module or introducing the next one, I would say, well, as so-and-so said in their discussion post, insert X point, and this is really valuable for what we're going to do next. And try to rotate through students as well, so that you're calling attention to the contributions of everyone in the course. Another option, again, this has to be optional because our online courses, we don't have required meetings, but you can have optional Zoom meetings. This particular professor, again, this is just a grab from a particular course, invite students to, come meet me, ask questions, cuss me out, whatever they want. This is their opportunity to interact with the instructor. So if you're brave enough to have that, I would say go for it. Because this is, not mandatory, it's possible to maybe have a bit of a more informal conversation with students if you want. If you want to have like a more formal study session where you go over particularly confusing or muddy concepts, is also a possibility. And, considering that online students have different schedules, different things competing for their time, you might consider recording that. If you have a really productive discussion with the students that are able to make it to that virtual open house or what have you, record that and post it, and fill in the other students with what was accomplished. Some other ways you can build in interaction opportunities into your course: post frequent announcements. I think, we naturally do this as things come up, things are broken, we need to change plans, always. But beyond just housekeeping announcements, think about maybe posting an announcement once a week, introducing the next week's content, summarizing the previous week's content, clarifying those points of confusion or muddy points. As we said on as I mentioned on the previous slide, highlighting good student confusions or good student contributions, excuse me. So you have a couple of different opportunities there. Ask for feedback yourself. So we have the watermark surveys at the end of the course, but you don't necessarily have to wait until that point to get feedback from your students. Think about integrating maybe a midterm survey or part of term survey, just asking students to share their feedback on how the course is going. And then if students do share something that's constructive and that you feel that you could change or you could integrate into the course, follow up on that. Because students don't just wait until the end of the semester and integrate it into the next course. I think students really appreciate it when they see that their feedback is actually appreciated and actually taken into consideration, when and where appropriate. And then finally, this is, I don't mean to state the obvious, but reach out individually as needed. If you have students that aren't logging in for a extended period of time, just send them an email and maybe check in with them. Because you never know what the reason behind that might be. And sometimes just a gentle nudge is all it takes to get students back into the course and back into the game. Another option, another place anyway, where you can interact with students and encourage students to interact with you is in your feedback. If you provide detailed feedback on assignments, that's a great way where you can encourage students to reach out to you for questions, where you can ask them questions. Another option is to record video feedback. Again, adding yet another layer of that kind of human element. And this is, again, super easy to do in D2L. This is a one-click process. There is a record video option. When you go to assess an assignment Dropbox assignment, just click on that and you can quickly record a video, just, maybe briefly summarizing why students received the grade they did, what they did well, what they didn't do so well, and sometimes just having a human voice saying that out loud, especially if you're delivering, a pretty extended, critique, or if they received a particularly low score, that can be a bit helpful, I think, in terms of easing students' anxiety about assignments and about why they may have received the score that they did. We have a hand up in the chat. I think, is that you, Melissa?
Yeah, I just wanted to, cause since you shared that option, I've used that option before, but then students said that they couldn't see it. So where does that go?
Oh, I know. I think we talked about this before. I seem to remember you emailing me about this.
I was like, did I waste a bunch of time?
And that's when you're right. It is hard to find. It is hard to find. Students, so if you record video or audio feedback, students have to go back to the assignment Dropbox itself.
Okay.
If they go back there, if that makes sense, if they go to assignment Dropbox and click on the assignment itself, that's where they can see the link to the video.
Rather than
not from grades. If they click on their grade, and it's going to take them just to the text feedback. I don't know why that is, but anyway, they have to go back to the assignment Dropbox. So, with the caveat that it can be, you may have to explain to students where they need to go to find their actual feedback. That is one disadvantage of the video feedback in D2L. Yvonne.
Hi, yeah, one time last semester, I recorded audio feedback about a discussion, and no students could find it anywhere. So I felt like that was a complete failure. So
oh no, okay. I'm less sure about discussions. I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head. But if you email me later, I'll look into figuring out where that audio feedback goes. Sometimes D2L it puts things in a place that you're not expecting. So I'm sure it's out there somewhere. It's probably just a navigational
right.
issue. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Jasmine.
Hi. I was wondering if there is a way of doing the test feedback, something like this way.
For quizzes,
yeah, quizzes.
Yeah, I don't think that there is actually.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you can't do it though. In your own, on your own, maybe separately from
Yes.
the actual quiz function. You could send. I think you can send a video in an email, in a D2L email.
Yes. Okay. I was curious
yeah,
to see similar to this. Okay.
I don't think it's built into that. I hope I'm not mistaken in saying that, but I think you can leave video feedback on assignment Dropbox and discussions, but I don't think you can do it for quizzes. Unfortunately. I think it would be great if you could. We can put that on the dream list for D2L. Okay, great questions. And glad to hear that, you all are exploring, using the audio and video tool despite, some of the setbacks that we have with using those tools.
I think you can add video to
quizzes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It goes as an attachment, or in the feedback text editor, you can insert stuff as well. So
Right. Yeah. That is true, because pretty much anywhere in D2L, you're going to have that insert stuff button. It's behind, if on the slide, it's behind the arrow with the play, pause, record, stop button.
But there's also a record video option on the attachment, or you can add a file on test as well. So
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for chiming in on that. Yeah. So there is a way to record feedback for quizzes. So good to know. Okay. Great questions. I'm sorry if I'm skipping anyone in chat. I'm a little bit behind, but there will be time to revisit here at the end. I promise I will get to you. While we're on the subject of, D2L tips and tools, another thing that you can use and you can integrate is intelligent agents. So I'm not going to get too into the nuts and bolts of how to do this because we have done workshops on this previously. I have a link to that, which I am sharing in the chat if you want to learn more. But essentially what an intelligent agent is it allows you to set it up so that it will automatically email students who do not log in or miss assignments for a period of time. So it's just another way that you can kind of keep on top of what students are doing in your class, who is falling behind, especially when you have 5 courses and hundreds of students and it's kind of hard to keep track of everyone. This is just it's automated, but it also helps you to more efficiently keep track of students who are falling behind and give them that opportunity to reach out, to catch up, and interact with you as the instructor as they need to. So that is another tool that I would recommend looking into if you have not already. It's super useful, and it's a great way to get a conversation started with your students. Again, sometimes that gentle nudge, just a single email, is all it takes for students to respond. Sometimes they'll respond right away and explain kind of what the situation is and what it is that they need from you. So just as long as you're at least creating that opportunity for them. Okay, so engagement with other students, because we also want students to have at least some kind of opportunity to interact with their classmates. This is a component that we have in in-person classes that's often missing in our online courses. So I'd suggest, think about some ways you can design opportunities for students to get to know each other. So a lot of you have probably have some kind of introduction discussion, and that's great, allowing students to, share who they are, what they do, what their interests are. You could also think about doing some kind of fun icebreaker, even beyond that, if you wanted to. Got a nice, this is a great resource I'll send around later on. It's a big list of online icebreakers, where maybe you have students do some kind of activity that connects to the course content in that very first discussion and gets them talking and thinking about things from the very start. So for example, in the past, teaching history, I've had students, post a GIF or post an image that, is from your favorite historical time period, something like that. If you're teaching a geography class, maybe having students share where they're from, use an interactive tool of some kind where they can pin kind of their location on a map or a globe or something like that. Another one I've seen that seems like a really great idea, especially in courses, I'm thinking like English or communication, that really emphasize kind of self-disclosure and comfort participating in discussions. Is having students maybe share like something from their own personal life. So share a photo of something that's really meaningful to you, explain why. It's just an opportunity to get students, just gives the students an opportunity to know who each other is, kind of as persons and as people, and to build community in that way. A couple of interactive tools I'm also sharing on these slides. I'll send around later. I know a lot of instructors have used to great effect. It's Padlet, Flipgrid, and then word clouds. These are just interactive external tools where you can kind of facilitate a more kind of interactive visual discussion if you would like. Keep in mind too, so we talked about audio and video earlier. Students can also post audio and video in response to discussion prompts inside of D2L. So if that's something that you're comfortable with students doing, you might encourage them to do that. I'm thinking of you, Gail, and like communications, where you want students to be comfortable expressing themselves verbally. That might be a good option for your online discussions, encouraging students to get used to recording themselves and posting video responses to discussion prompts in which they have to express themselves verbally. The other thing about icebreaker activities, I've already said this, don't forget to participate in it yourself. You know, introduce yourself, respond to other students' introduction posts. That's really the best space where you're going to make it like a good impression and get connected with students pretty early on. When we're thinking about student engagement, also think about designing meaningful discussions that actually prompt conversation and push the conversation forward. I would say if your discussion prompt has one and only one correct answer, it's going to be kind of hard for students to have a conversation about that. If you want students to respond to a question that has kind of a open and shut answer, and it's kind of hard to create engagement from that, because when students reply to one another, what are they going to talk about? How are they going to kind of build on that, or discuss that further? So just something to think about. I suggest, you know, if you're thinking about integrating discussions into your course, think about designing open-ended questions that lead to higher order thinking, that encourage students to share resources or share their own experiences, to add value to the discussion and push the conversation further. If you don't already, another way, you know, you can make sure that conversation actually is happening is make sure you actually incentivize it. One model that we recommend is praise, question, polish. Just to make sure that students are responding substantively to others' posts in a way that actually is contributing to the discussion, that's, you know, sparking thought, pushing learning forward. Praise, question, polish. It's a very simple format for students to follow. It's a you know, I think it's a great format to also follow when you're thinking about giving students feedback yourself, where you start with the good, start with what they liked, start with what the original poster did well, ask a question, any question that you might have, and then polish and point out maybe ways that the original poster could improve on the work that they've already done, or things that they might not have considered initially. And again, we mentioned this before, but highlights successful student posts and revisit important points from past discussions, and make the discussions really a part of the core of your course in that way. So a couple of good discussion prompts or discussion formats that you might consider that I've seen used with pretty good results, is asking students to draw a personal connection between course content and something from their own experience, from their own career, what have you, or to define a concept in their own words. If you're talking about something that's relatively subjective, maybe ask students, you know, what does this mean to you? How do you define it? That's something that can really get students engaged, because if you have a term that maybe students have kind of a different perspective on, that's a great place to kind of start that conversation. A debate. Do you agree? You know, post a quote from scholar X. Do you agree or disagree? It's really great, especially if, you know, you're touching on controversial topics in the course, or just to introduce controversy that exists in an academic field to students and get them grappling with, you know, what academic discussion and debate looks like. A scenario. If you maybe share with students a real life scenario that illustrates a concept or a topic that you've been talking about or reading about in class, and then have them explain how they would respond to the scenario, or how they would apply a particular conceptual model of some kind to address the scenario. Analysis, have them share an external resource and apply, again, some kind of analytical model from the course to analyze it, like a primary source. If you're in a history course, have them, you know, pick one from either your textbook or from the internet, have them share it, and then explain how they would analyze it using from a particular perspective or using a particular model. Role play, students love this. I've seen some students really get into role play activities, but have them assume a fictional or a non-fictional identity and then respond to a question from that person's point of view. It gets really interesting when you have students responding to each other, impersonating kind of different identities. In the news, again, it's another opportunity for students to share resources from beyond just the course and to draw connections from the course to the wider world. Maybe share a news article that touches on a course concept and then explain what that connection is exactly. Peer review, especially good for, courses where students are producing creative work. Maybe have them post some kind of work in progress and have other students constructively critique one another. And reflection. So this is great. For some courses don't lend themselves as well to online discussions naturally. I was thinking in particular of math, which, generally, not to pick on math or anything, but generally in mathematics, you kind of do have an open and shut correct or incorrect answer. But you can still have a meaningful discussion about the concepts that students are using and applying in a mathematics course, maybe by having like a reflection discussion. So what's one thing that you learned in this module? What's one thing you're struggling with? And, maybe some students have found external resources or something in the textbook that particularly helps them working through different problems. So this is just an opportunity for students to talk to each other about where they're struggling, what their process is. And if you're seeing, particular points of confusion, it's a great place for you to intervene as well. Got a couple of really great examples from the wild here. Really well-designed discussion prompts. So do you have a favorite show, film, book, comic, etc.? That is the perfect example of the heroic journey. Having students apply a concept in literature or theory in literature to something that's more familiar to them. So they're drawing connections to the wider world. Share, this is from a Photoshop course, so share a particular piece from that week, and then other students are allowed to comment and review, make suggestions, and critique what they like and what they think could be improved upon in the initial post. This speaks to, I would say, more kind of the category of, do you agree or disagree? Take a stance on something. The second sentence of the Declaration of Independence refers to the idea that society should ensure an opportunity for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Discuss what this means in terms of the importance of good health to American life. So very open-ended, a lot of directions students could go with that. In the earlier sessions, a lot of some of the sessions were talking about creating opportunities for student input in course policies, and I would say you could do that as well in a online course. So we do have kind of a default list of netiquette guidelines that most online instructors use, but think about ways that you might pull students into thinking or talking about those about netiquette and about civil discussion in an actual discussion. So maybe open it up to students to talk about, well, what rules of civil discussion should we agree to in this class? And what do you need? What should we all agree should our respectful or civil behavior in an online course should look like? And then finally, and I promise I'm going to wrap this up, is thinking about how students are engaging with your course content, because again, that's another point of contact that students are having with as far as communication with you and interaction with their instructor. So you want to think about, does the overall layout of your course create a welcoming learning environment for students? In an in-person class, you might provide a lot of that guidance that you normally would out loud, verbally. In an online course, it has to all be kind of spelled out in text. So all of the instructions students need must be available in the shell. So a lot of your spoken instructions that you might normally give out loud have to be kind of translated into text. The Tilt template, I think, is a really great format for thinking through this, because it forces you to very clearly explain the purpose of the assignment and then to spell out the specific task that students must do in order to successfully complete it. if you got some kind of assignment that is especially technical or complex, I think Jamie shared this with us in the chat earlier, consider recording a demo video, just showing students exactly what you want them to do. If it's involves some kind of intensive technical process, go ahead and show them how you would work through that problem on your own computer. Module introductions. Another great space where you can reach out and communicate with students and generate interest in either the upcoming or the previous module, just letting students know what they can expect or summarizing what they've already learned. Clear structure. So making sure that your modules follow a logical sequence, that they're consistent, you have some kind of weekly routine, or at least, if not weekly, some kind of routine that students can very easily follow so they always know what they can expect from the course, because you will not be there in person to personally guide them through it. Navigational cues are also helpful, keeping in mind that you're designing a website where students are moving through multiple pages, so what they should do next, where they should go next. Those navigational cues can be very helpful. Self-evident titles. See a lot of when you upload files to D2L, it usually will just put in the file name. I'd encourage you to change that so it's obvious what exactly that file is and how it fits into the larger context of the course. So they're not just like looking at, a long string of numbers or a file name. Quick links are also a really great way to aid in navigation through your course. If you want students to look at this, go to this, refer back to this, just drop a link to any other part of the course using the quick link tool, and you can very easily send students there. That is found. It is the icon that looks like a chain. It allows you to insert links to other parts of the course. And then finally, I would suggest, thinking about how can you provide a variety of resources in online courses. I mean, we've all been, I know I've been in especially dull kind of repetitive online courses that are, mainly all text. But, because it's web-based, you have a real opportunity to use resources beyond just text, beyond just lecture. So I'd encourage you to think about integrating images that illustrate concepts particularly well, or videos from YouTube or from other sources that you feel can enhance student understanding, especially those more kind of sticky points of understanding. Hannah Hurdle, who is here in the chat, is going to talk to you more about where you can find those resources specifically, especially open educational resources. So stay tuned for that. On January 10th, she'll be talking to you more about that. And again, utilize those discussions. Those are the place where students can inject knowledge and share resources as well. So we are a little bit past time. For those of you who need to leave, go ahead. I really appreciate you sticking with me and staying with me through this. I'll open it up for questions at this point. And if you want to share, I'd love to hear what strategies you have used to enhance kind of community and connection in your own online courses. I know we already had a few suggestions in chat, but happy to hear from anyone else who would like to share or who has questions. Oh, Melissa.
Hi, I just wanted to go back to the very beginning and get clarification on the requirements for providing engagement. And there's been a lot of discussion in the chat, and of course you think immediately of discussions, but one person said they don't use discussions, that they just focus on content. So how do we define, I guess, because you said there's a mandate that we provide some opportunity for engagement, whether it be weekly, bi-weekly, whatever that might look like for our course. So if it's not discussions, what would that look like if we're not using a discussion format?
Yeah, like I mentioned, discussions aren't the only thing that you can use to fulfill that requirement. So as long as there's regular and substantive interaction with the instructor in some way, be that via feedback, via
it has to be documented inside the course, and on a regular basis. So it just doesn't happen like at one point in the course. Then there's multiple ways to do that, of like having like a frequently asked question, open discussion, but also if the instructor provides contextual feedback on assignments and that's documented within the course, they offer opportunities to meet via Zoom or something like that. There's basically like a list that can be checked off. Discussions are the easiest way to do that. Plus discussions give students the opportunity to talk to each other. So what we're really pushing for is like, where is that documented within the course? And if it's not, then it kind of qualifies as a correspondence course.
Okay, so it's not talking about the engagement between students. That mandate or requirement is engagement between each student and the instructor, not necessarily engagement that we're providing for back and forth between students.
Right. And I mean, you can still add like an open, like an introduction discussion and a FAQ discussion, and that could still qualify to meet that component for student to student, because it gives them an opportunity to ask questions and inside the class rather than individually. So at least there's some way that students are able to communicate with each other, but stifling that student communication is not something we typically promote.
Yeah, I was just getting clarification because based on discussion in the chat, we do use all of that. So I was just curious with the minimum with
and what we're
Yeah.
basing that off is like NC Sarah. Since we subscribe to that allows us to offer online courses throughout the country, or international even. And they have a set of guidelines, and it's based on the U.S. government Department of Education guidelines too, which are somewhat vague, and they've clarified that to have like, if you have 2 of these 5 things inside your course, that's okay. And we kind of even encourage more of that. So as long as it's documented within the course, but we're really coming into trouble with that if we get audited for accreditation and it doesn't exist, then that can be a flag. So we're trying to just promote simple ways that create that engagement or opportunities.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, the minimum requirements are a bit maybe vaguely defined, but we're trying to think, beyond kind of like the minimum requirements. Because we do have like this mandate, like I said, we have like this mandate that we have to follow. But I would say, probably discussions are probably, like Jamie said, the easiest way that you can get students talking to each other and talking to you. And I think that's a really vital part of any course, that if you don't have some kind of component like that, you might miss out on opportunities to kind of get a sense of students' understanding or particular kind of like areas of confusion that students are having, if you don't have some kind of discussion component.
Dale, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, the way that you're talking about this subject right now, the way that I learned it in my graduate program was to think of it as, in terms of communications, one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. That's always the way that they kind of phrased it. And as long as there was an opportunity for all 3 of those modes of communication, then the course itself, it was kind of like set up like a web where everybody had the ability to communicate with themselves, with the instructor, or personally with the instructor. And as long as that could happen, then, I mean, whether or not a student's going to take advantage of it is another question, but the opportunity should be there.
Exactly. Yes,
Exactly.
you're right. Yvonne, use your hand up.
Yeah, I just, I'm not quite sure how to ask this, but a lot of our online courses are taught by adjuncts.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of students comment that they have some online courses where they never get any feedback from an instructor. And I don't know who is supposed to monitor that, or if there is some way to monitor it, or is there some way we can encourage all of our instructors to be active in that? I'm not sure, but that concerns me.
Yeah, that concerns me too. Like, it's hard to go in each course and try to figure out what is actually happening. I think what we've been doing since we've been working with course leads and course maintainers is adding an instructor button that's hidden so the instructor can see. So if it goes to an adjunct, and then having those expectations on the instructor of like how the course is going to be taught, or what the expectations are, how it tends to work, and then adding, you know, how do you plan to grade things, or how do you plan to communicate with your students, and then you're integrating those communication policies, and those may be dependent on the division or even just the expectation of the course. But it's really unacceptable for students not to get any sort of feedback, because that's a big red flag.
Well, I have to say that a previous dean, this was like 10 years ago or more, had told us that we don't have to respond to students' discussions. And so I think there was some kind of low expectation set that maybe we need to communicate better.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't have to, but I would strongly, encourage you to participate in discussions. I mean, there isn't.
And how we kind of promote that in trying to make the instructor's job easier is you can preemptively answer your own discussion questions and just have it in a text file. And then once your discussion is complete, you can post your perspective of that discussion. And that's something that's really easy to do. And you can even do that in a timed news announcement as well. So you can set that up for all of your discussions if you wanted to, preemptively before the course even starts, and have them just auto release of talking about the discussions. And then you can add on to that if you want to include that praise question polish of pointing out one or two students that actually did well, or you thought was really successful in sharing theirs. So like John did a good job explaining this, and Mary did a good job with citation or something like that. And that prompts more engagement from your students to go look at these students who did well. And the idea of that is to try to cover or acknowledge each student somewhere in the course.
Yeah. I would say, we can kind of build in like those opportunities when we're like developing online courses, and, encourage instructors and adjuncts to, provide detailed feedback, participate in discussions. I mean, everything I shared today, it's intended to be, suggestions for how you can kind of set a higher standard for interaction and engagement in your online courses. But yeah, I would agree with Jamie. It's concerning if there's no feedback being given or no interaction happening in discussions. Yeah. Dale, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to what Yvonne was saying. I had actually written it in the chat earlier. It's like, if I can make sure that whoever that student is that contacts me about not being able to get a response from another instructor, I at least want to know that I can be a champion for that student at Nashville State. And so if I let that student, if I tell the student to reach out to that instructor and do their best to reach out, but they're still not getting feedback, there may be something behind the scenes I can do to help that. But the big thing is for me and that student, I let that student know that they have a champion. And if they can't get in touch with that instructor, please reach out to me and I'll help them as much as I can. So as long as they know that they have a contact with the school, I think that not only helps the student, but it helps with retention as well.
And you make a good point. I think this is something we can be proactive on if faculty agree. Like maybe we can add something inside the syllabus template for the student, if you feel like your instructor is not responding to you in an appropriate way, or if you're just not getting feedback, like who could you respond to in the division? If it's a chair, if it's somebody just in charge of like maybe getting those responses, we could probably, catch those instructors or adjuncts who may not know they need to respond or need to engage with their students, and try to fix the problem during the semester rather than after the semester is already done and tends to be too late. So, and just try to make it more communicative among divisions in these courses of like, if we add a policy or something within there, like a communication policy, if you feel your instructor is not giving you feedback, or you're receiving no feedback, please contact this person. And that can be done by division as well. So,
yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone for kind of sticking around. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
you.
thank you all so much for coming and for all your wonderful suggestions and questions. Um, if you have any more, feel free to reach out to me or to Online Learning. Happy to have you as always. Have a great rest of your afternoon.